Is a new bonfire of the Quangos about to rage? That's what the Prime Minister seemed to promise this week.
Over a number of years, politicians have chosen to hide behind vast arrays of Quangos, arm's-length bodies, regulators, reviews, you name it, a sort of cottage industry of checkers and blockers, using taxpayer money to stop the government delivering on taxpayer priorities.
He suggested the dramatic axing of NHS England, a Quango set up in 2012, will merely be the first step in ministers taking back control and really delivering for the British public on health, housing, energy and everything else this government has promised. It's worth noting that we've heard this kind of hostile rhetoric about Quangos from politicians before, railing against their supposed inefficiency and waste.
Local democracy reborn, the Quango state in the dustbin of history where it belongs.
There's an awful lot of bureaucracy and red tape and quangocracy.
We see it most of all in the Quangos and government bureaucracy. We didn't do enough to take the power back.
Tony Blair, David Cameron and Liz Truss there. But let's start with some definitions. What is a Quango? It stands for Quasi-Autonomous Non-Governmental Organisation. They're funded by taxpayers but not directly controlled from Whitehall. And they're not all the same. Some are executive agencies administering public spending, like UK Research and Innovation, which decides what research projects get funded by the public science budget. They can be regulators of sectors of the economy, like Ofwat, which oversees water companies. Some are advisory committees like the Office for Budget Responsibility, which judges whether the government is likely to stay within its chosen borrowing rules. How many are there? Well, the most recent official data counted 304, though Labour, despite its anti-Quango rhetoric, is also setting up several new ones, including Great British Energy to drive public investments in renewable energy and an independent football regulator. So what's the problem with them? Some, like John O'Connell of the Taxpayers Alliance pressure group, says the fundamental problem is their lack of democratic accountability.
Quangos are not only very expensive, spending upwards of £300 billion of taxpayers' money every year. There's a sense that they're removed from democratic control. So there's that feeling when you hear voters say nothing ever changes. Part of the reason will be because whatever good ideas politicians might come into government with, sometimes they find it hard to enact them because there are bodies set up by regulations or legislation that have a very technocratic function that can often stymie big ideas and big reforms, so people feel like nothing ever changes. Really, what we're looking at is probably over 300 bodies. A lot of them are quite small, and I think that in defence of Quangos almost, a lot of these small advisory committees are exactly the kind of thing that Quangos ought to be. It's just when the size and the scope is so broad now, people rightly feel like that they can't have a handle on it at the ballot box. And a good example very recently was from the Sentencing Council, of course, who issued their own guidance on sentencing guidelines. And of course, the Justice Secretary is now in a bit of a ding-dong with that Quango in terms of bringing it back under democratic controls. Ideally, we'd like to see sunset clauses when a Quango is launched in the first place, that it has a sunset clause that is met, so that when it achieves a particular policy objective, it is wrapped up.